What's going on, everyone? This is Miles Dompier, and welcome to Checkpoint, the show where we stop to break down all the biggest gaming news stories of the week so far. Joining me today is my good pal Jez Corden, and we have a lot to talk about. First up, after weeks of anticipation and speculation, we finally have some juicy sales figures for From Software's latest RPG, Elden Ring. Yesterday, Bandai Namco dropped a press release that gave us an insight into where this game stands in terms of its sales. And it's pretty staggering, Jez, because they have officially announced that worldwide, Elden Ring has sold 12 million copies. That makes it one of the biggest Japanese-developed launches of all time. Ahead of this, we kind of threw some figures around. Last episode of Checkpoint, we talked about, where this might stand, and we estimated roughly, 10 million in the first week, and 2 weeks later, we are over 12 million. So now I gotta ask, Jez, with figures like that, where do you see this game at by the end of 2022?
Well, the cool thing about Elden Ring is that I think it's going to have this really long tail, similar to games like Skyrim, because there's so many different ways to play it. You can play it in co-op, you can play a melee guy, a caster guy, a samurai, and the different ways to play it aren't just superficial. There's also tons of secrets, there's tons and tons of content, there's New Game Plus. I've got 100 hours on my main save and I've barely explored half of the map yet. I just got this thing where I have to go through the whole map and check off every single thing that I can find, even though often the loot isn't even that useful for me. But then I also see people completing it the world record completion time's 39 minutes now or something, or 28 minutes or something.
Yeah, 29 minutes. 29 minutes, which is absolutely ridiculous because my main profile where I've done almost everything, or I think I've done everything you can do in one playthrough, I have about 150 hours on that one. There is a lot that you can do in Elden Ring.
It's been incredible to see it get the sales success that it deserves and the recognition that From Software really deserves on the main stage. They've got a really storied history, and it feels like after all this time they've really broke into the mainstream, and I think it's just going to go from strength to strength. I wouldn't be surprised if we see 20 million by the end of the year. They could announce DLC expansion coming next year, and because this game's gonna have DLC expansions, probably really big ones too. And this is it's gonna keep going. This is nowhere near the end of Elden Ring. It's really exciting to see a game blow up like this, especially a game that's so pure. No microtransactions, no loot boxes, no extraneous BS. It's just a pure video game. It's great to see.
You love to see it, and for some additional context here, why those sales figures are so important, From Software's previous best-selling game was Dark Souls 3, and it took Dark Souls 3 roughly 4 years to hit 10 million units sold. So to hit 12 million in roughly 2 weeks, that blows away Bandai and From Software's wildest expectations in a lot of ways. And I agree. I think by the end of 2022, there's a realistic possibility we see 20 million. And it's funny because ahead of this, I was speculating on, how big this game might be. And my ambitious expectations for this were that it would sell 10 million copies in the first year. And I had people say, no way, it's too niche. They're not going to hit that. And to see them absolutely crush it, like you said, I love seeing From Software get this recognition because they've, for a long time, been one of the most consistent developers in the industry. Whether you love their games or not, it was hard to deny what they did and how they did it. And to see their kind of unique blend of RPG blow up into the mainstream with Elden Ring, I love it. I love to see it. I'm excited for the future. And if there is Elden Ring DLC, which some data mine stuff suggests we might see at least some PvP focused modes, I'm there for it. Let's keep it going. And one last question before we move on from this topic. Do you think this is going to enter in the stratosphere with some of the best-selling RPGs of all time, a la Skyrim? Are we going to see Elden Ring get to 30 million?
I mean, I think for sure we'll see it get to 30 million in the years to come. I think at least from a critical acclaim perspective, it's definitely already one of the best RPGs I've ever played personally. I definitely put it up there with the best of the best. Even if you're not really that into the sort of the trial and error sort of difficulty and having to research how and overcome some of its complexities and systems. One thing that Elden Ring's really reminded me of, honestly, is classic World of Warcraft. Like, vanilla World of Warcraft was this difficult. It was this opaque. Even the story was this opaque. And the discussion around the story and the systems really reminds me of World of Warcraft back in the day, which used to be a really hard game. And that was huge too, you know, in the same way. So in the internet age, people will overcome complexity if you wrap it in a high quality package, you know, in a sort of format that can't be ignored. And I think Elden Ring just can't be ignored. Like, it's difficult, but the quality is just, there's nothing else like it out there. And it really does remind me of the way vanilla World of Warcraft was back in the day. And hopefully it'll wake up some of the big Western AAA publishers out of apathy. You know, I keep seeing these headlines like Far Cry 6 sales disappoint and Watch Dogs Legion sales disappoint. Maybe they need to like ask themselves why those sales keep disappointing, and maybe look at Elden Ring for some answers. I don't know.
There we go. We'll have to wait and see. Next up, EA last week gave us an inside look at the development progress for Dead Space. More specifically, the remake of the beloved survival horror series. In this developer live stream, we got a look and auditory experience as to what's being changed, from audio occlusion to weapon comparisons. They are really showing you exactly how they are trying to make this remake special and how it is going to be a drastic improvement from the original. So we've seen bits and pieces, and obviously development on this is still very early, and what we've seen isn't designed to be final gameplay by any stretch of the imagination. But where are you sitting with Dead Space? Are you excited about this remake?
Man, it sort of comes back to the point I just made about AAA publishers living in this sort of realm of apathy right now. It's kind of like, I just don't have any faith in anything they do anymore. After like repeated disappointments, Battlefield 2042, what EA's done to BioWare, they shut down the studio that made Dead Space after forcing them to make it co-op. So I should I'm going to sit here and get excited about EA realizing its mistakes? Nah. But like, the gameplay they've showed off, like you say, shouldn't be taken as indicative of a final product. But honestly, in that weapons video they showed, I thought the animations were better in the original. So, hopefully they'll polish that up a bit, but they've got high expectations to fill. Dead Space still holds up today, and if it's anything less than the original in any way, then it's going to be a complete failure in my view. But I don't know. I just I don't put any stock in anything some of these AAA publishers do anymore, but I hope that it ends up being good. And, I'm sure it'll at least be decent. We've seen Capcom do a great job with Resident Evil 2 and a decent-ish job with Resident Evil 3 remake. Hopefully we'll see similar results from Resident Evil 4, but there's just something about Dead Space that doesn't sit right with me. EA was like, oh, nobody wants horror, so we'll kill Visceral. But then they saw how much of a spotlight Capcom got with Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 7 and Village, and they're like, oh yeah, we want some of that. It doesn't feel like it's born out of wanting to make a good game for the fans. It feels like it's born of smelling the money and not knowing what to do with EA motive, frankly. I want to be excited for it as a Dead Space fan, but I'm just sort of feeling cynical towards it for whatever reason.
I think that's a healthy place to be. We've seen EA be very cynical in the past with their motivations. For me, as a huge Dead Space fan, as a big fan of Visceral, I still have a little chip on my shoulder from the way they treated that team and the way that they basically forced them onto other projects and then shuttered them when those projects that they were forced to be on didn't perform in the way they wanted to. Dead Space came out in a time where survival horror was on the decline. There was a lot of really mediocre survival horror franchises. Some of our most beloved ones like Resident Evil, Silent Hill, they were still putting out games, but they weren't what many people wanted them to be. And Dead Space came out and said, bam, here's what the future of survival horror can look like. And that was so impactful and so important for its time. And like you said, this remake needs to be a big deal. And I think it is healthy to look at EA and say they probably are looking at Capcom's financial success not so much the critical success of Resident Evil 2 specifically, and saying, we can cash in on that. We can do a remake of Dead Space. People love Dead Space. Let's bring it back. We're not going to have Visceral involved because Lord knows where they are at this point, but we're going to take one of our teams and we're going to remake it. And I think that's why they are spending so much time with these developer live streams to show you the quote unquote good intentions behind this remake. But like you said, the animations that we've seen in this remake so far, I think look worse. They look stiff. They look janky. And again, this is not indicative of the final product in any means. And I'm not going to, disparage the entire game based on this. But the way Isaac holds the gun, the way the recoil kicks back, it looks off. Everything about what I've seen so far looks off, feels off. I'm a little worried at this point. So I think that is a good place to be. I'm hoping that this comes out, delivers, because I love Dead Space. I would love to see a new Dead Space entry, and even Dead Space 3. As much as people didn't like it, I kind of put it in the same camp as Resident Evil 5. Maybe not the best horror game, but still a damn good co-op game. It's a bummer that Visceral got penalized for putting out a great game and having it not be what fans necessarily wanted because of pressures from EA. So we'll wait and see how this turns out. For people who are excited about this project, it's coming early 2023, so we won't have to wait too much longer unless there's a delay, obviously. But keep your eyes peeled on the Dead Space remake. Our final major topic today, Jez, is a pretty big one. And this is a kind of breaking story that came from Video Game Chronicle this week about the current state of the initiative and Perfect Dark. So a report from Andy Robinson of Video Games Chronicle claims that nearly half of the core development team of Perfect Dark and the initiative has left in the last 12 months. The specific number they throw around in this piece is 36 people, including Drew Murray and game director Dan Nurburger. Those are some pretty high-profile departures from this project. And this is coming after it was announced that Crystal Dynamics was assisting on development of Perfect Dark, which a lot of people, myself included, thought was a little bit weird in the grand scheme of things. So Jez, given these seemingly turbulent developments regarding the initiative and Perfect Dark, should players be worried about the initiative and the state of this game?
Well, I've been doing some of my own research on what's going on at the initiative right now. And I am not worried, personally, based on what I've been hearing. However, I would have been worried if they hadn't bought on Crystal Dynamics, because it sounds like what has ultimately happened at the initiative is a big disagreement over how to proceed and staff and structure Perfect Dark. I was told from, sources I can't, mention, that trusted sources, I should add, that basically there was a big disagreement over how to proceed with Perfect Dark. The way the initiative was set up, almost in a unique sort of studio format. I don't want to say flat structure, but they did build it to try and explore a different way of making a game studio, anti-crunch, which is great, a more sort of democratic development process structure. The problem with that is that there emerged two schools of thought about how to develop Perfect Dark. One of them was, we hire the people in. The other school of thought was, we remain small and build sort of high quality indie level games. But because of the hype surrounding the studio, I don't think Microsoft wanted to let the initiative be that kind of sort of smaller studio. I think the expectations had gotten to the point where people wanted them to make grander games, right? There's that notorious job listing they put out where they said they were going to be making quadruple A games.
The quadruple A, yeah.
Yeah. And they put their name to Perfect Dark, which is a story franchise that has a fan base, and people have expectations for that to be more than just a high quality sort of indie sort of game. So the two schools of thought emerged from what I understand. A, we hire people in, that would have taken 2 to 3 years. Or the other school of thought was go for a more traditional structure and get Crystal Dynamics involved, with basically Daryl Gallagher leading the whole project, as he would have done a Tomb Raider game. This sort of conflict between the two schools of thought seems to have resulted in a lot of what we see as the departures now. It sounds like the initiative was originally set up to be a sort of more of a flat organizational structure where the core team all had sort of like, almost like a Valve-like sort of flat organizational structure. And we see how often Valve puts out games. It's not very often, let's be honest. So just got to a point where it wasn't working for the team in general, or perhaps Microsoft itself. They were just like, we need to put a plan in place here. From what I understand, the people that are still with the initiative and Microsoft itself, they prefer this plan and they're happy with this plan. What they've got now is that they're working towards a common goal for the first time and that the game is actually moving forward. You can say that mistakes have clearly been made and that it sucks for the people who were invested in the initiative's original initiative. I mean, the fact the studio is called The Initiative is a hint at what they were kind of going for here. They were taking the initiative on making a new structure. And it felt like, from people I've spoke to, that there was a lot of investment in the structure of the studio, in the studio's identity, kind of. And when they brought Crystal Dynamics in, that sort of impacted that sort of identity. And a lot of people didn't like that, and they've subsequently left. For what we're interested in as Xbox fans and gamers is ultimately, are we gonna get a high quality game out of this in a timely fashion? And that's the part that I'm not worried about. It sucks that it's come to this and that a lot of people have left. It sucks that some people, perhaps feel they've been mistreated, I don't know, and feel like that they wasted their time and what they saw as their vision for the initiative didn't pan out. That sucks. And it's a shame that happened, But for customers and Xbox fans, I'm personally not worried about Perfect Dark now. It sounds like they've got a vision in place and they're all moving towards that in a sort of common goal kind of way. Maybe getting to this point was a mess and a bit messy, but it sounds like they're in a good place now, and that moving forward, we will eventually, hopefully, get a game that's, of a decent level of quality in a timely fashion, which I don't think we were going to get with the other way they were trying to do it. Ultimately, the proof will be in the pudding. If there's a great game at the other end of it for Xbox fans, that's ultimately, what the goal is here, to put out a good game. And we'll just have to wait and see if they actually deliver on that.
Yeah, it sounds like with this particular situation that there was maybe a promise, and maybe promise is a strong word, but for a different structure. And a lot of the people who were brought on early on wanted to be part of building the culture, building this team, and doing something different in the video game industry, which, as you touched on, your name is The Initiative. That sounds like that is your goal there. And I think, as they got deeper and realized that projects would be further and further out as they're building up this team, and we're talking about bringing in Crystal Dynamics to execute on Perfect Dark and make sure that they have a pipeline that is realistic for shipping a game, I think that's the reason a lot of these folks left, is because they said, I understand from a business perspective why you're doing this, but this isn't necessarily the reason that I signed up to join the initiative. And again, we don't know for sure if there's hard feelings. It sounds like on the initiative side, things are very positive. I'm going to read a positive statement from the studio head, Daryl Gallagher, here in a second about where the project is at. But I do think that certain people were sold on an idea that didn't end up coming to fruition. And I think that's why we've seen so many people leave the initiative. And again, for the future of the game and the future of Xbox Game Studios, it probably isn't a bad thing, but it isn't in line with what some people wanted. So let me read this statement from Daryl Gallagher about this project, because Daryl Gallagher actually sent a comment to VGC when they were doing this reporting. So they were aware of the report and they were willing to comment on it. So here's what Daryl Gallagher said. In creating the initiative, we set out to leverage co-development partnerships to achieve our ambitions, and we're really excited about all the progress we're seeing with our relationship with Crystal Dynamics. In this journey, it's not uncommon for there to be staffing changes, especially during a time of global upheaval over the last 2 years. And there's plenty more work in front of us to deliver a fantastic Perfect Dark experience to our players. We wish all our former colleagues the very best, and I'm confident in the team we have in place, the new talent joining, and we can't wait to share more with the fans. So despite this message from Daryl Gallagher, there has been a lot of conversations looking at titles like Everwild, looking at the current state of Halo Infinite, and a lot of Xbox community members are saying to themselves, should we be worried about Xbox Game Studios? Are there fundamental management issues? Where are you at with the current state of Xbox Game Studios as a whole? Should we be worried about titles like Everwild?
It isn't a good look. We've got like Halo Infinite, which is, mired in complaints right now from the lack of content and the lackluster service component. Yes, it's free, but free to play games tend to need ongoing content. You mentioned Everwild as well, game that was probably announced way too early, way too prematurely. I think some of this is, announcing things prematurely and mismanaging expectations a lot of the time. I've written articles about this where Microsoft, they put out like cinematic trailers, often using a high production value CGI to announce a game. Like they did it with Phantom Dust, one of your personal favorites. They've done it with Scalebound. They're done it with loads of games where it's like, yeah, we'll pay a studio a huge amount of money to make us a cool looking trailer, and then we'll fill in the blanks later. They did it with Recore as well. Like honestly, the Recore CGI trailer was probably the best part of the game overall. And even though I did enjoy Recore, the CGI trailer presented a vastly different level of quality to what we got in the end. And I do worry that Microsoft is building up this perception that it can't fully deliver. We've seen like Gears esports shut down yesterday as well. And, the fans of Gears multiplayer have been really vocally unhappy with the way they've handled that franchise, with the abundance of microtransactions and the lack of content on the back of that, But at the same time, Microsoft delivered the highest Metacritic average in the whole industry in 2021. So it's like, there's almost like this dichotomy of, yeah, they're delivering high quality games that review really well, but the games that grab the headlines, which are your action games really, they're the ones where they seem to be having the major issues. Like Age of Empires delivered, Flight Simulator delivered, and Forza delivered these sort of almost, these games that have like a simulation component to them. I have no idea why that is, but I do think they run the risk of building up this sort of negative perception around their games. And I want to believe that that's partially the pandemic. I want to believe that's partially moving away from the years where they weren't very well funded. Phil was promoted to the executive leadership team only a few years ago, and it takes time to build up, a world-class studio stable that can compete with Sony. I do think there's still a question to be answered there, and we just have to wait and see. It's another one of them.
It is really interesting to look at Xbox game studios as a whole, because as you touched on, last year, highest Metacritic average. They had Forza Horizon, Halo Infinite, which a lot of people are very negative on right now, but that was in a lot of people's Game of the Year conversations just a few months ago. So people were clearly happy with what they shipped initially there. And so it's fascinating that there's so much negative energy surrounding this. And I think it is a combination of showing games too early. And again, that is now a tool for recruitment. A lot of people have to do this because there's no way they can keep a secret for an extended period of time and hire a ton of people to make a game. It's not realistic. Also, Xbox, as we've seen and I've talked to Joe Neat about Rare and the support that they get and how they are basically what he considers to be the most highly funded independent development studio. So they have the freedom to go back to the drawing board, try new things. And I think that's what Everwild is they want to deliver something that's really unique, and that takes some iteration. And because we saw it early and it's been years since we've seen like true gameplay for it, a lot of people jump out and say, okay, this must be in development hell. There must be serious issues here. People are leaving. What's going on here? And again, I think the pandemic is part of it. People are just trying to figure out what's making them happy in their own lives. I think we're all in a similar situation there. We want teams to have the freedom to experiment, or at least that's what we say. I know a lot of people are very vocal about being anti-crunch and allowing big budget games to experiment. And then when they do, and it takes a while, it becomes, why isn't this game out? Why aren't you like Naughty Dog? Naughty Dog, no matter what, they are pumping out a game, no matter what it takes, no matter how much they crunch. Why aren't you doing that? And then you have to ask yourself, we were just complaining about crunch last year. We were always complaining about that. And Microsoft, I'm sorry, whether you think it's fair or not, they cannot have that culture with a new studio they are building from the ground up. You can't do that. You can't be this publisher trying to set a gold standard and trying to be inclusive and trying to respect the lives of your developers and then turn around and say, okay, people are complaining online, so you have to get this game out. And I think that's kind of the frustration that I'm seeing regarding some of these conversations is there's no empathy to the people making it. A lot of us are selfish in our ways because we want games. And for a lot of us, it's all about the games at the end of the day. As long as we're getting high quality games, we can ignore everything else behind the scenes. And for better or worse, Microsoft, their laundry is out in the open, way more than PlayStation. We know a lot more about people leaving. We know a lot more about development issues on Microsoft's side than PlayStation side. And that leads people to get pretty negative about the future of Xbox Game Studios, when I think it's refreshing that titles like Perfect Dark and Everwild can go back to the drawing board and they can say, you know what, we're going to reevaluate what we're doing, as opposed to Crackdown 3, as opposed to Recore, where they're like, hey, you get 18 months and a really small budget, make a game. Doesn't really matter what it is. Crackdown 3, we're not scrapping it. No, we're gonna salvage what we have there. We're gonna scrap all the ambitious stuff we talked about with the cloud, and we're just gonna ship a game that's fine. We're gonna get Terry Crews in there to add some marketing sizzle and some buzz and just put that game out. We're past that. And I think that is why I'm excited about the future of Xbox Game Studios, despite some of these seemingly negative developments.
Yeah, there is this hypocrisy almost where like elements in the conversation are sort of like, yeah, don't do crunch. Crunch is bad. Or, oh no, the execs forced them to make this game and stuff like that. And then when Microsoft sets up studios that have an anti-crunch mindset and, you know, gives them more freedom to tweak and experiment and stuff, and it does take longer, like you say, suddenly there's an outcry about that. Like, you know, you can't have your cake and eat it.
Why isn't Phil coming down and demanding they do something is basically what I'm seeing online. I'm like, we were just complaining about Ubisoft and EA and all the cynical reasons to make games.
The same people who are, you know, vocal about crunch are now talking about how, you know, Microsoft needs to move faster making its games. Like, it's sort of like, you know. So, like you say, gamers are selfish. I'm selfish. Yeah. I want good games, and I want good games now, not later.
Yes, exactly.
But that's also why Microsoft's bought like 1 million studios, you know. So I'd rather have the freedom to eventually lead us to a good game. But if you are having that freedom, there does have to be a good game at the end of it. Like, if we are having these like 2, 3, 4 year development cycles on games and we're still getting Crackdown 3 level stuff, I think then there's definitely a problem that needs to be addressed.
We can revisit these conversations when Perfect Dark ships, because again, if at the end of all of this drama, there is a mediocre game that's a mess, then yeah, maybe we can say there is a management issue currently and they need to reevaluate or get more involved with their teams. But I think for me, allowing teams the freedom to experiment and try new things, I really can't see that as a negative. Ultimately, there's just a bunch of human beings trying their best at the end of all of this. All right, so that is going to do it for this week's episode of Checkpoint. Thanks so much for joining us. If you enjoyed this video, smash that like button, share it out, subscribe to the channel, all that good stuff. Just feed that insatiable YouTube algorithm. We will be back next week. In the meantime, take care, everybody.